Do bosses like Michael Scott actually exist? And if you work at 4-1, what's your craziest story? My first boss in America, I was 21. He was Asian American. I had never seen The Office, but noted the absurdity. He would get free potato chips from a guy in a company truck and would stuff his cheeks in the middle of telling me what to do. He always offered some. Fired a coworker for screaming some racist stuff at me by just yanking her out the door. Called another coworker a cub or a baby lion because she was tiny with wild unruly hair. Would do a small mini roar whenever she was about to report for her shift or when I mentioned her name. Ran around the place with a wig on his head imitating me. Brought his daughter to work and give her piggyback rides in the office. Would ask me to take videos. Would talk to black people in a black way. He would say "What's up shorty" to the ladies and "What's poppin'." Called the guys Tyrone and would say "she it" in his most convincing black voice. It was actually pretty good. Would ask me to teach him random Arabic words so he could yell them sporadically in the middle of the day. He always got the accent right. Had an open door policy and would do shots in his office. Started a small chicken farm in the back of the building and would give out whole chickens to the staff. Had me and a coworker try to slaughter one time. I colded and nicked it just a little bit and shrieked, spraying all three of us with blood. Received a visit from the city people to tell him he couldn't keep chickens in back. He was rounding the main floor with a small basket of freshly laid eggs, just as they were asking for him. Did the chicken farm again the next summer, this time with a small garden growing squash, cucumber, corn etc to disguise the chicken coop. Happily gave out vegetables along with chicken. Would be extremely proud of taking home a tray of his own eggs to his children. Ate 2 fresh eggs every morning. Bought a wok to work to deep fry sausages in. Sometimes made lunch in the back. The entire floor would smell like food and he would round us all 3 of us to his office to eat. Would regularly fall asleep under his desk. The snoring was so loud you could hear it in the front. Once a client asked what that noise was, and I said it was the plumbing. Woke up after his naps looking puffy, but acting as if nothing happened. Would immediately go next door for a cherry coke. Would constantly eat hard candy to stay awake during the day. Ate too many edibles at a party I hosted once and passed out. Told me to hire someone, but when he saw the girl did a comical thing with his face. Eyebrows raised and eyes big, think Kenji Arn, because she was having trouble fitting into her chair. She was a bigger girl. Took away chairs the next day because they encouraged us not to concentrate on the client. The girl was a no-call no-show the following week. Had a love-hate relationship with a groundhog not long into his farming venture. He never caught the guy. Once threw a cricket at me from the very opposite end of the office floor. He and another coworker kept such straight faces as I finally convinced myself the cricket flung itself at me. I watched the cameras at the end of the day, only to see them do it. I'm still traumatized. Has an office to this day full of the weirdest collection of things. A few feather from favorite chickens of his that he had since consumed all named and dated. A rabbit paw someone gave him. A goat's hoof. A framed quote I told to me by a very high homeless person. I don't remember the rest. It's just an odd place to go into. Had a hard time growing a beard and would ask me what I thought of the progress of his soup taster. Nicest boss I've ever had, well-meaning if a little racially insensitive all while being fascinated by other people's cultures. He would buy different cuisines for us to try each week. Gave bonuses because he knew the job didn't pay much, so that was always a nice surprise. He paid my former coworker when she had to stay home all through her husband's COVID. Also, he loves llamas, alpacas, baby goats and when I showed him how to use Reddit he would almost always send me an alpaca photo. I still get a photo now and then. Also 3 years after leaving he still sends me photos of his illegal farm and recently asked me to post his cucumbers on Reddit. Edit. Thank you for the gold guys. I'm glad you found my bosses as amusing as I did. Also I forgot to add that he fell into poison ivy bush once and didn't know right away. He ran around screaming until we sat him in his office semi-undressed and put medicine on his wounds. He was so miserable for days, it was hard to watch. He dove headfirst into the wall when asleep once and needed to go to the doctor and get 3 stitches on his busted lip. He came to work that morning with a huge lip and kept having to explain himself all day. We kept joking his wife was beating him up. He still insisted on snacking as usual. At one point he sipped ketchup with a straw. I had a boss sneak up behind a middle-aged female employee and pick her up, then immediately drop her down saying I didn't think you weighed that much. He could not stop laughing. He was the principal. This occurred during passing period in a crowded middle school hallway. I had a boss once who spent all morning locked in his office. He asked me to come in after lunch where he showed me a handmade graph. He then proceeded to explain that this was a chart of all the time he had ever had in his life. See, here it is blank, until I joined the army. Then I went to a Rachoka here. Then they sent me to Vietnam where Rachokas only charge $2 per time. That's where you see the big jump. I was on 2 tours, but then got shot in the face. I came back home, and you see how it just drops to almost nothing. I was astounded. My boss is certainly Michael Scott-esque. When I first started I was essentially Pam as well, since I was both receptionist and his assistant to some extent. My favorite story was back when we were prepping for a conference. Some context, he's terrible with the English language in general, and will mangle phrases and descriptions to no end. How the turntables. So on a group call he kept talking about wanting a golden hamster ball to do giveaways with, was raving about how great it would be spinning around while people walked by, all the while everyone on the call was just sitting in confused silence. However, by that point, I had become so good at decoding his nonsense that I knew he was referring to a gold raffle cage and sent him a message privately asking if it's what he was thinking. To this day he still talks about the fact I can read his mind and must be psychic. And he still refers to it as a hamster ball. All in all, he's a pretty nice guy and a solid boss. Hired me based on a gut feeling and has been decent to me ever since. I think I knew it would be a good fit when during the interview he tried to tell me about the 4 pillars of the company and forgot one. Told me later it was knowledge. He wanted a pomegranate for lunch and they were out of season, but that didn't stop him from sending me on a quest to every grocery store in town in search of a pomegranate. Multiple produce guys laughed at me, but that was the easiest $13 hours I've ever made. Edit. Wow, this blew up. Rather than replying to each of you, I'll say it here. No, I did not find a pomegranate. And when I came back he was eating Subway and he seemed to have forgot he'd even sent me. Maybe I could have gone home or to the movies etc. But IDK. Driving around leisurely listening to the radio seemed like a pretty good alternative to doing my actual work at the time. I did in fact check the gas station in Carbondale. They also do not carry pomegranates unless they are in season. I had a redhead boss who made us all sit down and watch a training video about how we shouldn't refer to him as a ginger because it is bullying. No one had ever called him that. I used Michael Scott as a reference point for an old boss of mine from the moment I started working there. He made Chewbacca noises on the regular because one of my coworkers' names sort of vaguely sounded like Chewbacca. It didn't. Used voice to text extremely loudly in his office for no reason. To send really personal messages, got really excited, and wore a specific vest anytime we had after work outings scheduled. Shouted the same like 7 references to old movies and extremely awkward hip hop song quotes 100 times a day, and insisted on greeting all our international coworkers very loudly in their language. They all speak perfect English, of course, looking around for approval afterward, and then fully giggling at everyone's French accents on conference calls. He also told me a lot about an improv show he did for a full year after it happened. That said, he had all the good parts too. He never hesitated go to the mat for any of us, whether we deserved it or not. He gave really sage business advice and great examples of how to face challenges out of absolutely nowhere. And he came to every community play I did in the 4 years I worked for him and told everyone else in the office how good I was in it for the following month and chastised them for not coming. When things really got serious or bad in my life, he couldn't have been more kind, helpful, and supportive. Honestly, probably the best boss I'll ever have. Had a boss who was very peculiar. For instance, he'd open a random closet, look at the stuff inside, then go on a tirade. Look at all this. Who bought all this crap? You did. Oh. Well, somebody needs to throw it away. Constant stuff like this. I had a boss that used to watch me through a gap in the glass partition between our desks. She wanted to see if I was paying attention during meetings. One day, I put a large folder to cover the gap and she freaked. I still laugh when I think about it.